My name is Right. I am the voice of reason. I speak for the Last Crusade.
Visible and public behavior of the enemy for many a year has posed a three-part puzzle that none is likely to unravel unless a certain crucial insight behind that behavior is brought to light. The first puzzle is an inability of the enemy to name itself or its goals, or indeed to call anything by its true name. The second is an unwillingness to treat true dangers to the public weal soberly, while simultaneously treating imaginary or trivial dangers with hysteria. The third is an addiction to paranoia, particularly in the form of conspiracy theories. Let us examine the first puzzle first. Why, when they speak, do the servants of the enemy speak only in gibberish and argle-bargle? Why, for example, does the enemy call itself liberal when it seeks the direct opposite of all liberalism? The Founding Fathers, who were liberal in the classical sense of the term, overturned an elite system of birth privilege by means of enacting a limited government promoting equal protection under the law. The enemy seeks to remove all checks and balances and limits from government in the hopes that absolute power will be used to establish privileges based on race and sex and create a permanent elite, aristocrats in all but name. Instead of a right to life, the enemy seeks a right to prenatal infanticide, unrestricted and taxpayer-funded. Instead of a right to property, the enemy seeks a socialist collective, where all goods and services are manufactured by quota and distributed by quartermasters. The elite shall own everything, and the world will merely rent. Instead of a right to liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or the right to bear arms, the enemy demands conformity and uniformity in all things. To call this program of anarchic totalitarian socialist plutocracy liberal is to use the word in the opposite sense of its meaning. Likewise, for words like progressive, democratic, social justice, political correctness, all are used either as meaningless mouth noises or to mean the precise opposite of their true meaning. Likewise, words that refer to normal and decent virtues or to lawful and wholesome institutions, all are replaced by mouth noises or swear words of inverted meaning. A new and ill-defined word like diversity or gender-neutral or homophobic or sexual orientation has to be introduced into the public dialogue in order to avoid true names that truly names the object being discussed, such as racism, misandry, chastity, or perversion. Merely calling monogamy a tool of the patriarchy, or calling normal and decent romantic relations between man and wife heteronormativity, renders open discussion of the matter almost impossible. Such Jabberwocky serves many purposes. First, Jabberwocky is deception. The enemy introduces argle-bargle and blither into public discussion in order to drive reason away. Second, Jabberwocky is chaos. To this day, even among alleged conservatives, one cannot use a word like equality and expect to be understood according to the ordinary and clear meaning of the word. Small wonder that even honest men are confused and bewildered. Third, Jabberwocky is vainglory, also called virtue signaling. Those who willingly utter known untruths out of love of untruth do so to display their peacock tales of presumed moral and mental superiority to their neighbors. The unwilling, forced to utter known untruths or humiliating gibberish out of fear, are hence dispirited and unmanned. So, next, Jabberwocky is humiliation. The nonsense he is forced to speak acts like a scarlet letter or yellow star or some other visible badge of shame. Fifth and finally, Jabberwocky, like orc speech or like the colors on a ship's mast, also will serve to show loyalty to the idols of the enemy. The inclusion of the unwilling creates the illusion that the enemy is more numerous than it is. So here we have 5 reasons why the Jabberwocky language consists always of lies. Yet these reasons do not explain all the cases. It is more than mere deception, chaos, vainglory, humiliation, and idolatry at work here. For the Jabberwocky language is used even among the servants of the enemy, even in private, when there is none to deceive, humiliate, or impress. More to the point, Jabberwocky language is used even when it is counterproductive. There is a deeper truth here, an answer not yet seen. So much for the first puzzle of the enemy. The second puzzle of the enemy is the blindness to real dangers combined with the overwrought shows of panic toward imaginary dangers. Compare, for example, the danger posed by Islamic terrorism compared to the danger allegedly posed by an Islamophobic backlash. Contemplate the decade upon decade of global warming fraud, the global cooling fraud, the global climate change fraud, no doubt soon to be followed by a global climate stasis fraud. Remember the nonchalance with which the left, during the Cold War, regarded the threat from the Soviet Union, to the overwrought rhetoric drooled in bucketloads upon the alleged threat from Russia under Putin, allegedly a puppet master of presidents and congressmen. Again, there are a list of reasons for the enemy's blindness. First, the servants of the enemy are craven. They are merely physical cowards who fear harm, even when no threat exists. Second, some of this cowardice is a false claim meant to provoke sympathy or to usurp an unearned moral superiority. Third, some of this nonchalance is merely folly. The fools do not know what is dangerous and what is not. Fourth, some is backseat driving, envy, and backbiting, where hatred of successful leaders and soldiers from among the sane and decent men drives the enemy to spit contempt on our victories by the simple expedient of saying there had never been any real danger to begin with. See, for example, the Cold War or the Global War on Terror. The moment either conflict ended in victory, the enemy left off screaming in favor of preemptive surrender to screaming that the danger had always been non-existent. Fifth and finally, since an imaginary woe can never be solved, the power grab justified in the name of battling it need never cease to balloon, nor need the shovels trenching the public coffers ever be put aside or bent into plowshares. For example, mandating the use of catalytic converters can solve the problem of air pollution from automobiles, but global warming will continue to be a menace forever. It is too convenient to put away. Likewise, St. Patrick can drive the snakes out of Ireland, for snakes are real, but neither the bellman nor the baker can drive the snarks out of England, for snarks are not real. The post of snark hunter is an endless sinecure. While cowardice, falsehood, foolishness, envy, and the desire for snark hunting can explain some instances of ignoring clear and present dangers in order to wax hysterical over trifles, it cannot explain all examples. For a coward would fear real evils as well as imaginary ones, and a fool would fear neither. And meanwhile, the envious would defame only the victories of the other side, not his own, by dismissing real dangers as imaginary. Nor would stooges continue to clamor and scream about imaginary dangers as if they were real, in a case where they stood to gain nothing. So there must be a more robust answer, one that explains more and more clearly. So much for the second puzzle of the enemy. The third puzzle of the enemy is his addiction to paranoia. A few examples might serve. The theory of patriarchy as proposed by the feminist is a conspiracy theory. It is the belief that an unseen and invisible patriarch can somehow keep the majority of women trapped in unhappy and unfulfilled lives, while at the same time the written law, the social customs, and the corporate culture showers females in the current day with privileges even queens and duchesses in the times past never enjoyed. This ascribes to this patriarchy more magical powers than those granted by the helm of Hades and the sandals of Hermes and the wand of Circe. For it grants the patriarchy the ability to fly everywhere, to remain unseen, and to turn little boys carefully raised by their mothers into woman-hating beasts. The theory of systemic racism proposed by social justice warriors is likewise a conspiracy theory. The ability of systemic racism, promoted no doubt by armies of unseen right-wing Klansmen and libertarian neo-Nazis, to undermine and ruin black lives and send hordes of trigger-happy policemen to exterminate them, yet somehow, without the least evidence of any uptick in black deaths, or changes in the statistics showing the rates at which blacks commit crimes, or are victimized by black-on-black crime, reflecting the alleged systemic racism at work. That the Klan and the neo-Nazis can undo all the good work of decades of the Great Society programs and of affirmative action and of race quota hiring and admittance indicates a magic power the conspirators have. One wonders how the conspirators can continue from triumph to triumph while never showing themselves. Likewise, again, it is also a conspiracy theory when Marxists speak of the historical inevitability of capitalists forcing all industries into monopolies and then driving down the wages of working men to starvation levels. The Marxist assumes a degree of cooperation between competitive businesses, including international cooperation, which is not only nowhere in evidence, but which is starkly and simply impossible. For example, if it were true that women earned 20 cents on the dollar in wages less for doing the exact same work under the exact same conditions as a man, a wise entrepreneur, factory manager, or shopkeeper of either sex whose greed outweighed his alleged loyalty to the misogynist bigotry conspiracy would hire no one but women by offering them a wage 5 cents on the dollar above their current rates. This would attract any female labor on the market, but also allow the shopkeeper to lower prices and raise profits by 15 cents on the dollar of his overhead. To believe that no shopkeeper or factory manager or business investor dares break ranks with the conspiracy of systemic misogynist bigotry, so that even Silicon Valley technocrats, Democrat politicians, and Planned Parenthood cannot and dare not oppose the vast right-wing conspiracy keeping women's wages depressed, is to believe in a conspiracy that is both invisible and omnipotent. Feminism, political correctness, and Marxism are all conspiracy theories. That is, they're all paranoia disguised as politics. Now, to believe such a thing is mere crackpottery. It's akin to believing that the moon landing was faked, or believing the royal family of England is serpent people from Alfra Draconis. A conspiracy theory explanation of the history of the world is all the more odd and all the more ironic when it comes from the political and cultural left, who have, in reality, spread their doctrine and their influence through real conspiracies of which there is ample historical attestation. See, for example, the Cold War, or, to use a more current example, see the Russia hoax, or the murder of Jeffrey Epstein in his jail cell. And yet again, there are many reasons why paranoia is believed and propagated. First, the great advantage gained by paranoia is this: the paranoiac is free to attribute the failures of utopia to arrive on schedule to an invisible yet omnipotent conspiracy of wreckers or reactionaries. This theory is non-disprovable. The theory explains everything by explaining nothing. Once the crackpot deceives himself into believing in the invisible witch king in winged shoes with the magic wand can be everywhere and nowhere at once, the fact that no one has ever seen or photographed the witch king in the mind of the crackpot is confirmatory evidence. The second advantage of paranoia is that, when set against an omnipotent foe, any devilry is justified. 100 millions murdered by communism caused the political left not even a blench, pause, or scruple of hesitation. They think that one cannot make an omelet, so to speak, without a deluge of blood drowning the continents. Spreading lies in newspapers to ruin reputations and careers seems almost innocent by comparison. The third advantage to the paranoiac of his paranoia is catharsis. It has been a part of Marxist theories from the first to assert that men come pre-programmed with loyalty to class interests into which he was born. Likewise, feminists assert that all men, merely by the fact of being male, are given to male chauvinism. Likewise again, the anti-racist racists of political correctness assert that white and only white people are racist and blacks never are. Evil is a racial characteristic determined by skin hue. In all these cases, the paranoiac sees his opponents as being born to evil. His theory is a sick parody of the theological notion of original sin. All men are racist and sexist and homophobic capitalist pigs merely by dint of being born. Their conspiracy is an inevitable disease afflicting the soul, visible somehow only to the paranoiac, an untreatable disease, which somehow only the paranoiac can treat, and it's an unforgivable disease, which somehow only the paranoiac can forgive. The politically correct version of original sin is not absolved through prayer, good works, and faith, or through the sacrament of confession. It is absolved through rioting and insurrection. Only the shed blood, not of Christ, but of the murdered class foes and race foes in a violent worldwide revolution, washes this sin away. The catharsis for one's real and unadmitted sins can be had by psychologically substituting this imaginary version of original sin and using violence to wash it away. After looting a bank or shooting a cop, the cultist can congratulate himself on his refreshed sinlessness. For those too cowardly to commit crimes of physical violence, social media offers endless opportunity for whispered and anonymous libel to destroy reputation, livelihood, and life. The fourth advantage to paranoia is this. The cult paranoia creates a countless mass of soft-headed golem victims willing, eager, and ready to commit riot and arson at the behest of their masters, or to vote away or to surrender money and honor and power to the elite, in a contribution and atonement for their various forms of racist, sexist, capitalist, or other make-believe forms of imaginary original sin. The cult benefits not only in material wealth and political power, but also in imponderables like status and self-esteem. The elite like the applause, as well as the money and the power of life and death over their flocks. These elite are the Morlocks, preying on the weakness and mental torpor of an Eloi class of victims, whom, in effect, they consume for their own pleasure. Of such creatures are our political class, our high-tech plutocrats, our news media, our entertainment industry, our academic institutions, as well as a global bureaucracy openly acting to replace the institution of democratic republics. The paranoia puts an entire population of helpless and willing victims under their fangs to sup upon. So, the fifth and final reason for the cult of paranoia and all forms of political correctness, feminism, and Marxism is this. It sates a spiritual longing. Political correctness, despite the name, is not a political movement, but a religious one. It is, in fact, a heresy of Christianity, namely, one where the goals of the Christian compassion and the brotherhood of man are retained, but excised is the belief in God, who, alone, gives a rational justification for the compassion, and who, alone, makes all men brothers by dint of their shared creation at a single hand. But the modern world, rejecting God, accepts the nihilist doctrine that souls are mortal and that mortal life is meaningless. To find meaning in the vast and cold indifference of an empty and unguided universe, the modern mind turns inward on itself, telling itself that original sin is caused not by nature but by social institutions, and hence burning those institutions to ash will produce not anarchy but utopia. It is a false and silly myth, but it gives the empty hearts and corrupted brains of the willingly self-deceived hope and purpose. Now they can murder the unborn, commit grotesque acts of sexual perversion on children, castrate boys and dress them as girls, and murder hundreds of thousands of the innocent, all in the high calling, cause, and service to an imaginary utopia of Never Never Land, forever promised, never real. We now have recited 15 reasons why the elite of our current generation, and the zombified Eloi who follow and adore them, promote Jabberwocky in the mouth, phantom fears in the heart, and paranoia in the brain. The Jabberwocky is propagated for reasons of deception, chaos, vainglory, humiliation, and idolatry. The phantom fears are propagated for parallel reasons of cravenness, falsehood, foolishness, envy, and snark hunting. The paranoia is propagated because it is non-disprovable, absolves enormities, it is cathartic, it aids the Morlock in their power lust, and it aids the Eloi in their frustrated spiritual longings for meaning, purpose, and hope in their lives. These reasons are simply insufficient to explain the core of the matter. No one would willingly embrace such foolish madness and anti-human silliness, such hatred, such nonsense, such nihilism, without a stronger and deeper cause than these. A man has to sell his soul, split his tongue, darken his mind, corrupt his heart, castrate his honor, don the red-nosed cap and bells of clown-car nihilism, and fill his soul with grisly hatred to join this conspiracy and join this cult. The Morlocks, from the cult, will get power, honor, pelf, and glory. What do the Eloi get? What is worth the price of spiritual destruction? What makes it better to rule in hell than serve in heaven? Well, that answer is obvious enough once it is said. It is the pride of Lucifer. When properly ordered, pride is not a sin. It is acknowledging an excellence that one honestly enjoys, or the excellence of a loved one. If it is truthful, pride is not the pride of Lucifer. The sin of pride is the excess of pride, that is, being proud of an excellence that one does not possess. A spirit like that of Lucifer will boast himself to be equal to the All-Highest, to have created himself by himself, and therefore owe nothing to his Creator. So it is here. The pride of Lucifer is flattered when all names are nonsense and words are used in the opposite of their common sense. To Lucifer, common things are all vulgar. To call decency decent and perversion perverted is to speak only as other men do. But to call perversion an alternate sexual orientation, and to call decency cisgendered heteronormative patriarchy, not only displays a vainglorious inflation of the vocabulary, it displays one's credentials to the inner circle of one's fellow beings among the self-anointed enlightened. It also casts a sneer of cold disdain upon all the maiden aunts, hoary priests, ancient books, and dupes who abide by the traditional moral teachings of all generations and nations. Likewise, when one calls a conservative speech hate speech, and calls colorblindness racist, and calls words violence, and calls violence self-expression, the same logic applies. Peace is war, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. It flatters the pride to say these things. To Lucifer, given that he is mentally deeper and morally higher than those around him, and therefore any ancient or respected teaching which earned the respect it owns is contemptible. Only what is new and novel is worth consideration. The arrow of evolution always points from past to future, from primitive to sophisticated. The arrow always points upward. So to adopt a new vocabulary, one that reverses the moral implications of words, by mere dint of being new, froward, and opaque, has all the glamour of occult knowledge. It is the secret known only to our superiors, the secret kings. That this procedure of moral inversion of language also involves radical dishonesty is merely an alluring side benefit. The core of the matter is pride. Likewise, when the Luciferians can see a danger, for example, from global warming, cooling, change stasis, which for the last 4 decades has been predicting the end of all life on Earth within 12 years, and mass starvation by the far future year of 2000, the fact that it's invisible to ordinary men is a benefit. The Luciferians are like the courtiers of the emperor who alone can see his fine new clothes. And likewise, anyone who examining the facts and seeing no starvation in India, and the world still in business, can be scorned as deniers, too ignorant to worship science, and too morally corrupt to accept the secret truth. And this is not just cowardice, for the Luciferians are brave to the point of recklessness when it comes to clear and present dangers all men can see. To see the danger that all men with the sense God gave a goose can see allows for no boasting, no vaunting, and most of all, no scorn and hatred for one's neighbors, teachers, leaders, and authorities. But to have a special insight that moral superiority alone can grant, wisdom based on fashionable opinions among one's peers, this gives the pride endless room for self-aggrandizement. And anyone who questions, asks for advice, or speaks in a reasonable tone of voice can be denounced as suffering from a newly minted mental disorder, such as, for example, Islamophobia. Again, the dishonesty, the moral inversion, and the hatred permitted by the worldwide view of the enemy are benevolent side effects. Pride is the soul and center of the enemy. It eats his brain and darkens his heart. Pride grows like a cancer and kills off whatever healthy ideas yet might remain. All memory of light is lost. Pride, the pride of Lucifer, torments him without pause and spoils all his pleasure, ever growing until it consumes him. And this pride is his only companion and his only consolation. He has nothing else.